In the vast expanse of global economics and the geopolitical chessboard, Elon Musk stands as an unparalleled titan, orchestrating revolutions that extend far beyond technology. His Starlink satellite network, launched by SpaceX, has rapidly evolved from a novel idea in space technology into a transformative force challenging regulatory barriers, undermining legacy monopolies, and pushing the boundaries of governmental control over telecommunications. At the same time, Musk's omnipresence in international negotiations has accentuated his role not just as an entrepreneur, but as a transnational entity wielding outsized influence over governments, policies, and economies. Recently, South Africa, Elon Musk's country of birth, found itself at the center of a familiar yet intriguing tale of economic asymmetry and power play. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa approached Musk for investments across his industrial empire, ranging from the lucrative production of Tesla's EV batteries to Starlink satellite-powered internet services. Musk, already a regular fixture in the political corridors of Washington beside Trump's administration, offered the possibility of agreeing, if South Africa would dilute its black ownership requirement within the telecommunications sector. This move, dripping with global political undertones, taps into the broader narrative that underpins Musk's ascension, a man who can negotiate with world leaders, leverage invaluable political capital, and transform it into concrete economic returns. But there's far more to this than just local preferences or regulatory hesitations. It's a symbol of the larger tectonic shifts underway in the global economic landscape. The rise of telecommunications behemoths has always been intertwined with state policy. Think of the era when national telecom operations were inseparably linked to government interests, a time when control over communications infrastructure denoted military might and economic supremacy. In more recent times, telecommunications was a domain rigorously protected by governments attempting to regulate information flow, preserve security, and maintain economic sovereignty. SpaceX and Starlink's conquest from South Africa to South America illustrates a growing trend, the weakening of state-managed monopolies and the increasing reliance on transnational corporations in providing critical infrastructure like telecommunications. Starlink has entered an eclectic array of national markets, sometimes flouting local rules before their formal approval, forcing governments, long obsessed with control over digital networks and information highways, to either relent or risk falling behind in the race for digital connectivity. This isn't just a first-world problem, it's far-reaching, straddling the entire globe from the least connected areas of sub-Saharan Africa to the Philippines and Latin America, where Musk's sway is rewriting the entrenched playbook of economic governance. In a twist of irony, many of these nations have invested decades in building regulatory frameworks designed to protect local internet service providers, ISPs, and ensure critical data sovereignty. Starlink's very arrival obliterates many regulatory hurdles, highlighting how nations which refuse to conform or evolve their antiquated policies might inevitably experience backlashes in economic performance and digital competitiveness. Take South Africa's dilemma as a prime example. The 30% black ownership requirement is a vestige of post-apartheid initiatives aimed at reducing racial inequality and distributing economic participation more evenly. By fighting against this prerequisite for Starlink's access, Musk positions himself not just as an entrepreneur facing regulatory friction, but as an agent forcing South Africa to choose between advancing its digital future or clinging to its social and historical safeguards. But this negotiation makes clear the deep irony. While nations like South Africa need Musk's technology to compete and grow economically, they find themselves increasingly unable to counterbalance or control the expansion of his corporate empire, a dilemma faced by most governments today when dealing with these tech giants. Starlink's economic saga embodies a growing phenomenon, where sovereign states, no longer the primary economic players, are being eclipsed by megacorporations like SpaceX. These firms control assets, revenue streams, and technological innovations exponentially more valuable than entire national economies. For instance, SpaceX's valuation exceeded $150 billion in 2023, making it more powerful than the GDP of Angola, Serbia, and more than 80 other countries. With over 7,000 satellites in orbit and growing, Starlink now services over 4 million people across 100 countries, forcing governments to decide whether to adapt to this revolutionary force or fall victim to technological obsolescence. In fact, governments, traditionally powerful entities guarding critical economic sectors like telecommunications, are increasingly left scrambling amidst Musk's dominance, as we see with South Africa's negotiations or Taiwan's geopolitical reservations. Yet Musk's power doesn't go unchecked. While Starlink has rapidly captured global markets, it's evoked vigorous responses. Safaricom, leading Kenya's local telecommunications market by a large margin, complained to national regulators about the legal irregularities around allowing SpaceX to bypass the same regulatory framework they're bound by. Loud objections were also raised in places like Philippines, where recommencing internet services using Starlink sparked fears of privacy breaches and unwanted geopolitical alignment vis-a-vis Musk's close ties to China, given Tesla's massive manufacturing interests there. Still, resistance to Starlink seems futile, as countries struggling with inadequate traditional ISPs often have no choice but to embrace Starlink's offerings. This sentiment echoes loudly in rural Africa where unreliable connections have hampered not just economic growth, but also basic health services, as evidenced by Murang'a County in Kenya, which slashed costs by purchasing Starlink units to modernize dozens of health centers. In one sense, governments must weigh national pride and regulatory sovereignty against urgently needed modernization. Unfortunately for many traditional telecom operators and government bodies alike, the decision to allow Starlink into their airwaves seems almost foreordained. SpaceX's multi-layered global strategy is breathtaking in its foresight. Starlink provides cheap, reliable internet in places where governments struggled for years to deliver. On the surface, this looks like an altruistic endeavor, bringing the rural poor into the global digital economy, providing them with untethered access to e-commerce, education, and communication. However, beneath this shines the undeniable reality: each satellite dish delivered by Starlink extends the reach of Musk's ever-widening control. It's evident that Musk's ventures not only provide economic opportunities, but tether businesses, consumers, and even governments to a form of digital reliance on Starlink's vast infrastructure. This shift holds profound implications. Who controls this infrastructure, owns the entire ecosystem, benefiting primarily from its operation. Are we witnessing an unintentional reshaping of global dominance, where modern superpowers no longer wield geopolitical might through territorial arms, but through data flow, infrastructure control, and the power of megacorporations? Musk's multiple business endeavors, Tesla, SpaceX, and Starlink, stand as interconnected parts of a global empire that negotiates sovereign rights on the battlefield of economics. As his empire grows, so grows the number of governments tempted into compromising long-held policies for economic survival. Elon's deft mix of political influence and economic might is on full display in countries like Argentina and Indonesia, where governments, despite initial resistance, stripped away investment rules and national ownership standards just to get a taste of Musk's billion-dollar ventures. For countries like South Africa, Elon Musk exemplifies global capital's new face, one that refuses to conform to national regulations and leverages demand for technology and infrastructure in exchange for economic influence. If President Cyril Ramaphosa's government softens its policies to accommodate Starlink, it will mark yet another victory in a long list of nations Musk has bent to his will. While it's easy to chalk Musk's success up to brilliant technology and good timing, the deeper truth is much more revealing. We are in the midst of an economic restructuring where traditional state actors are becoming prisoners of the same digital and political webs they once controlled. Musk isn't merely an entrepreneur, he represents the intersection of state policy and corporate conquest, where governments bow to billionaires not with reluctance but necessity. The implications for connectivity are evident, but the larger question looms: how much further will national sovereignty be eroded in exchange for global economic integration directed from corporate Silicon Valleys? Understanding Musk's strategies in this evolving era of economic transitions forces us to observe: how far are governments willing to go to embrace technologies while compromising their regulations? As Musk's satellite constellation continues shining brighter in the night skies, so too does his control over the Earth from above, both economically and politically. This is simply the early phase of what could be the confluence of another economic superpower, not a nation, but an individual empire.